chief guest in this important World Trafficking Day, Waziri Simon Cherugoi, our invited guests who are in attendance physically, and our distinguished guests participating virtually. May I take this opportunity to welcome all of you to participate in this World International Trafficking Day. Allow me, ladies and gentlemen, to invite our first speaker of the day, the Chairperson, Counter Trafficking in Persons Advisory Committee, Mr. George Masese. George Masese.
Thank you so much, Principal Secretary, State Department. Allow me to move this for a while. The Cabinet Secretary, Ministry of Labor and Social Protection, all protocol observed, distinguished guests and ladies and gentlemen, allow me to introduce the Counter Trafficking in Persons Advisory Committee, which is a creation under the Counter Trafficking in Persons Act 2010, with the mandate of advising the Cabinet Secretary on counter trafficking in persons issues and the implementation of preventive, protective, rehabilitative programs for victims of trafficking. This is the second advisory committee since we started implementing the Counter Trafficking in Persons Act 2010. And of course, since the year 2010, when the first committee was established, we have, of course, made some tremendous achievements. And I'll highlight some of the achievements that the two committees have achieved. One is the launch and implementation of the National Plan of Action for combating human trafficking for the period 2013 and 2017. We have also been able to develop the National Referral Mechanism guidelines for assisting victims of trafficking. Also, the operationalization of the National Trust Fund for assisting victims of trafficking, and I'm happy to report that the chairman is here. Development of the National Operations Procedures for preparation of police case files on trafficking in persons for the Kenya Police Service. Since the year 2017, the Advisory Committee, together with the Ministry, we have been able to coordinate the celebrations of or the marking of the World Day Against Trafficking in Persons, and also creating awareness creation in trafficking in persons through working with different stakeholders. In place right now, we have also achieved by drafting the general regulations in counter trafficking in persons, and also we have the regulations on the National Trust Fund, which is assisting the victims of trafficking. Of course, with all those achievements, we've not been able to work without challenges. We've had our own challenges, but we've managed to work around them. Some of the challenges that we have been facing is the inadequate budgetary allocation to the fight against trafficking in persons in Kenya. The other one is, of course, the inadequate data. We are lacking inadequate data to monitor and evaluate the trafficking of persons in and without Kenya. Each year, we organize a commemoration of this day, and this year, we are marking it online. And we know as to why we are marking it online is because of the COVID-19. Working through the Ministry of Labor and Social Protection, where we are domiciled, we are happy to partner with our partners and mark this day through this online. In conclusion, I call upon the stakeholders to join us in creating awareness to communities and in building capacity for the frontline agencies to deal with trafficking in persons. With those few remarks, Principal Secretary, State Department, thank you so much.
Thank you, our honorable chief guest. We appreciate the chair, Counter Trafficking Human and Advisory Committee. The chief guest allow me to invite Chairperson National Assistance Trust Fund for Victims of Trafficking on Major Retired Marcus M. Mulavi. Honorable Marcus.
Thank you. Yes. The Cabinet Secretary, Minister of Labour and Social Protection, the Chief Administrative Secretary, Minister of Labour and Social Protection, the Principal Secretary, State Department of Social Protection, Your Excellency, the United States of America Ambassador to Kenya, Your Excellency, UK Deputy High Commissioner to Kenya, my brother, the Chair of Counter Trafficking in the Person Advisory Committee, invited guests, ladies and gentlemen. It gives me great pleasure to be part of this event to mark the World Day Against Trafficking in Persons 2020. Counter Trafficking in Persons Act 2010, Section 22, provides for establishment of the Board of Trustees for the National Assistance Trust Fund for assisting victims of human trafficking. The Board of Trustees was gazetted on the 24th of December 2018, being the first board for the Trust Fund since the enactment of Counter Trafficking in Persons Act 2010. The board is mandated to provide assistance to victims of trafficking, including return to and from Kenya, resettlement, reintegration, appropriate shelter, and other basic needs like psychosocial support, appropriate medical assistance, legal assistance or legal information, as well as information on relevant judicial and administrative proceedings, or any other necessary assistance that a victim may require as per Section 15 of the Act. The board is fairly young. However, in the short time it has been operational, we have been able to provide repatriation assistance to 5 victims of trafficking, 2 Indians and 3 Nepalese nationals. We have also approved funds for repatriation of 14 Kenyan victims of trafficking from India through the Ministry of Foreign Affairs when international travel resumes. The board has also visited and held discussions with the border management committees, that is Bania in Migori County, Busia in Busia County, Lunga Lunga in Kwale County border points. Mombasa and Cliffy were also visited as they are source, transit, and destination counties for trafficking in persons. The board is in the process of developing regulations to guide its operations. It further intends to forge partnerships in order to source for donations to boost the government allocation and hence fully fulfill its mandate in line with this year's theme, committed to the cause, working on the front line to end human trafficking. The board is committed to working with government agencies and other partners in the sector to assist the victims of trafficking. Thank you.
Thank you, Honorable Retired Major Muluve. The chief guest and invited guests, allow me to invite a very important partner in this process, the Chief of Mission, IOM, Kenya Country Office, Ms. Sharon Dimache. She's going to participate virtually, our chief guest.
IOM, can you come on the screen? IOM. IOM. Sharon. IOM, is she there? Dimache, are you now able to talk? Dimache, go on. You need to unmute yourself. We can't hear you. We can't hear you, madam. Yeah, yes, we can. Thank you.
Technical glitch. Yeah, thank you very much for this time. Given to me to come and give my brief remarks. The Honorable CS, Mr. Simon Chilugui, CS Ministry of Labor and Social Protection, the Chief Administrative Secretary, Principal Secretaries present, the ambassadors, diplomatic missions who are present, colleagues from the UN agencies, the NGOs present, distinguished guests, ladies and gentlemen, a very good morning to you all and a very warm welcome to this very important event that we are celebrating, the International Migrants Day, the International Counter-Trafficking Day. I look at this occasion being very important, and to IOM, it's very satisfying and gratifying, despite the COVID pandemic, to see many participants on this special occasion joining the rest of the world in marking the World Day Against Trafficking in Persons. It is a manifestation of a strong commitment and interest to combating human trafficking. As an IOM staff, and of course on behalf of the entire IOM and the UN Migration Network in Kenya, I am very, very pleased to have this opportunity to talk to you this very morning. Today is a very special day. When we look back 20 years, I see this as a 20th anniversary of the adoption of the UN Protocol to Prevent, Suppress, and Punish Trafficking in Persons, commonly known as the Palermo Protocol, which Kenya ratified. And I heard from the remarks this morning, from 2010, when the Kenya Anti-Trafficking Act was enacted, I see it's been 10 years from that time. So it's a very great opportunity to look back and see what actually has been done for the last 10 years as far as the Anti-Trafficking Act has been enacted in Kenya. I would also like to mention that it's been actually 25 years since IOM began implementing counter-trafficking program for us to join our hands together with the government and all the other stakeholders to look back and reflect what has been done as far as the anti-trafficking field is concerned. What have we accomplished? How the landscape has changed over the past decade, and assess the latest challenges that lie ahead of us. Human trafficking is a growing global crime which exposes thousands of migrants to unacceptable risks and violates their basic rights. We see clearly that this phenomenon also presents a challenge to the integrity of the international borders. From the recent reports by ILO, the crime generates globally an estimated 150 billion in profits per year for the organized criminal groups. For organized criminal groups globally, human trafficking is seen as a low risk, a high profit business. Ladies and gentlemen, since January 2020, our lives have changed drastically due to the COVID-19 pandemic. Due to domestic containment measures and the economic downturn, the demand for migrant labor continues to fall. The socio-economic impacts of the pandemic are exacerbating vulnerabilities in our societies, including systematic issues related to healthcare, social security, security of employment, or working conditions. Migrants especially are very vulnerable as they are not included in the government social assistance packages for vulnerable persons in which cash transfers programs have been instituted by the government to cushion the very vulnerable. As in times of economic crisis, increased insecurity, poverty, marginalization induced by disease outbreaks can be key drivers of human trafficking. Criminal groups such as traffickers are likely to take advantage of the vulnerabilities of these people. I was in Busia on 21st, and we had this lady who was leading the Association of Cross-Border Women Cross-Border Association in Busia. And she clearly mentioned that they are trying to support their family members to get food for our clothes. And there are lots of restrictions because of the COVID measures for containment. They are resorting to using the bush in order to cross the borders, seeking opportunities to generate income to feed their families. Increasing rates of unemployment is putting additional pressures on workers and also to countries of origin. And this continues to expose families to poverty, and at the same time also making people more vulnerable to human trafficking. As we know, Kenya is a source, transit, and destination country for victims of trafficking. We have recently seen human trafficking cases occur not only in border communities, but also in other areas and in internal regions of Kenya. We have seen brokers and human traffickers prey on labor migrants from rural areas. Increasingly, we are seeing more and more internal cases of human trafficking, a trend which needs to be carefully monitored in light of the COVID pandemic and the large reverse migration flows from rural to urban areas and from destination countries back to Kenya address, and especially now, and requiring trends we are faced with. In his message for 2020 World Day Against Trafficking in Persons, this year's World Day Against Trafficking in Persons honors the first responders helping to end the crime of human trafficking. Law enforcement officers, social workers, healthcare professionals, NGO staff, and many others are working around the world to prevent the vulnerable and ensuring their protection. Like the frontline, these providers are keeping vital services going throughout the crisis, identifying victims, ensuring their access to justice, health, social assistance, and protection, and preventing further abuse and exploitation. Ladies and gentlemen, in this light, allow me to acknowledge the great partnership we have had as IOM with the government of Kenya and other stakeholders, especially during this pandemic, to assist vulnerable migrants, including victims of trafficking.
IOM in close partnership with the government has been at the front line, not only during this COVID pandemic, but even pre-COVID in assisting those who are very vulnerable. We have cases that have remained stranded, where we have had referrals from government. We have been working really hard with all the stakeholders to address the challenges faced by these migrants that have remained stranded in the country within Kenya, but also those who are looking to come back to Kenya. We have offered accommodation, counseling, food assistance, clothing, medical services, assisted return and reintegration, those that managed to facilitate their return to their home countries. In the last 2 months, over 2,000 individuals have benefited from the assistance offered by IOM to address the specific drivers that would lead to human trafficking. We have worked closely with government and other stakeholders, including civil society organizations and embassies, to offer much-needed assistance to young girls who are currently trafficked in many parts of the world. In GCC recently, we have cases that have come to our attention where we are closely coordinating with the government to see how can we support them. Besides the economic support, we are also looking at the mental health and psychosocial support, which is very, very key, especially during this COVID pandemic. We are working to ensure that we put in place a coordination mechanism, like recently where we established, the government of Kenya took the lead in setting up the Nairobi process, a process that brings together the different countries within the Eastern Horn of Africa to ensure that we enhance protection to address migrant protection issues, including human trafficking, of course, taking into consideration COVID-19 vulnerabilities. I want to thank in a special these first responders and urge the government entities, the societies to join their cause for the victims of trafficking. The COVID-19 pandemic has exposed many global inequalities, has created new obstacles on the path to achieving the SDG, and left millions of people at greater risk of being trafficked for sexual exploitation, forced labor, forced migration, marriages, and other crimes. Women and girls already account for more than 70% of detected human trafficking victims, and today they are among the hardest hit by the pandemic. With previous downturns showing that women face a harder time getting paid jobs back into the aftermath of a crisis, vigilance is especially important at this time. If the world is to put human dignity and human rights at the center of the COVID-19 response and recovery, we need to be more to protect victims of trafficking and prevent vulnerable people from being exploited by criminals. On this World Day Against Trafficking in Person, let us pledge to work together to ensure that we all put our efforts together as a whole of government approach, whole of society approach, so that we don't leave anyone behind. On this note, I would like to mention that in Kenya, as the UN, we have established a UN migration network that brings together the different efforts of the UN agencies to fight, to support the government in the fight against human trafficking. And this will closely work with the National Coordination Mechanism on Migration and the Ministry of Labour and Social Protection, who are at the forefront in ensuring that we protect our victims. We protect our young sisters, our young brothers who are more vulnerable to human trafficking. Once again, I would like to call upon each one of you to please join hands in the fight of human trafficking scourge. I thank you so much for all your continuous effort, your continuous collaboration. Without your support, I don't think we would have done what we have managed to do. Thank you, and over.
Thank you, Sharon, once more. This is one organization, our chief guest, that is really helping us in combating trafficking of all manners, as she has explained. Our honorable guests, chief guest, allow me to invite a very special guest who's going to participate virtually, a representative of Bundok, Dr. Amado Filippo. Welcome, Dr. Amado.
Dr. Amado? Dr. Amado, UNODC? UNODC? If you're among the attendees, please lift up your hand because I've looked for you and can't find you. UNODC. UNODC.
I guess Judge Jennifer, he must be having problem logging in.
Yeah.
Maybe we could allow him to maneuver as we proceed to the next speaker. A chief guest and invited guests, allow me to invite another special, a technocrat who is very key in handling matters trafficking in this country, and that is the Director of Public Prosecution, Mr. Nuruddin Haji. The chief guest, you remember the process of trafficking. This office of DPP is very critical, and the DCI, these are very strong arms of government that without them, the process will collapse midway. It's my honor to invite Nuruddin Haji to make his comments. Welcome.
Good morning, everyone. Hello?
Go ahead. Go ahead.
Go ahead, go ahead, go ahead. Good morning, everyone. My name is Jacqueline Jagi. I'm here on behalf of the Director of Public Prosecution. I represent, I head a division of sexual and gender-based violence where these issues fall. He has asked me to apologize as he's held up in another meeting and read his remarks, or read the remarks on his behalf. Thank you very much, and we will start. The Cabinet Secretary, Ministry of Labor and Social Protection, the Chief Administrative Secretary, Ministry of Labor and Social Protection, Your Excellency, the Ambassador to the USA to Kenya, Your Excellency, the UK Deputy High Commissioner to Kenya, the Chief of Mission IOM, Regional Representative UNODC, the Chairperson Counter Trafficking in Persons Advisory Board, Chairperson National Assistant Trust Fund for Victims of Trafficking, distinguished guests, ladies and gentlemen, and all protocols observed. It gives me great pleasure to address this gathering in the honor of World Day Against Trafficking in Persons, who seemed committed to the cause, working to end human trafficking. Human trafficking occurs not only across international borders, but takes place within the national borders of the country. It is one of the most severe forms of human rights abuses, where human beings are the main commodity that is dealt with. To prevent and protect people from human trafficking, Kenya has a comprehensive set of national laws and has also ratified international conventions and adopted some through the Constitution. As the Office of the ODPP, we are the center of implementing the Act through the support of victims, investigation and prosecution of trafficking cases, as well as supporting our victims through the pre-trial and trial process, and also creating awareness on the rights of the victims. To make the war against trafficking in persons a success, the Office of the Director of Public Prosecution has also put in place several measures, which includes the establishment of a specialized unit within the Sexual and Gender-Based Violence Division, increased the presence of prosecutors in all regions of the country, developed a TIP or Trafficking in Persons Manual, trained and sensitized prosecutors, investigators, and other stakeholders on trafficking in persons, on how to handle trafficking in person cases in court, and many other mechanisms that we have put in place, data collection, we have also, in fighting the war against trafficking in persons, we also face quite a number of challenges, which range from challenges that affect victims, prosecution and investigation, as well as the judiciary. Some of them include lack of victim cooperation and corruption, which may cause low rate of prosecution of cases of trafficking. We also lack shelters and safe places. These facilities, the shelters and spaces are critical for the well-being and protection and support of our victims. They are few and limited. They are few and have limited capacity and resources, and most of them are run by civil society organizations. So far, we wish to congratulate Makueni County government as it has set up the only government facility to protect, to support victims. This means that there is some light at the end of the tunnel. While we have Witness and Victim Protection Agency, we wish to pray for the government to source or find a funding so that it's able to support to offer long-term support and protection to the to victims of trafficking. Of course, we have, as the ODPP, we have challenges in dealing with victims and witnesses. Most victims are also reluctant to share information on the perpetrators. This is because they are intimidated and lack of assurance that the investigators will preserve confidentiality and to avoid threats from the perpetrator. As the ODPP, we have established victim support and attend court. We have also joined hands with other institutions that provide psychosocial support to assist the victims of trafficking to be able to feel comfortable and attend their cases in court. As the ODPP, we have come to a realization that it is time that the judiciary thinks of establishing specialized division to handle TAP cases and SGBV cases, so as to provide easy access to justice and quick dispensation of cases. Finally, as ODPP, going forward, my office will adopt the following measures to deal with counter-trafficking cases. We will embrace prosecution-guided investigation techniques for more efficient disclosure of the offenses of trafficking in persons. We intend to also expand training specialized prosecutors for handling these cases, the trafficking in. We also intend to cooperate to ensure effective prosecution of cases, and we further will enhance the existing partnership and build new ones with different agencies, both at the national and international level, for the exchange of information on such issues as financial investigation and the history of successful prosecution and conviction between the source and destination countries, so that we are able to facilitate all the issues, bearing in mind that trafficking in persons is closely related to transnational organized crime. My office is deliberate to embrace a combination of actions and regimes of law to deal with TIP cases, of which would include tracing, seizure, and confiscation of profits of crime, and also signing documents such as seeking assistance from partners on mutual legal assistance. Finally, we'll also engage in public awareness. This will be important in informing members of the public about the dangers of TIP, identifying signs of trafficking in persons, and measures members of the public can use to assist people who may come into contact with potential victims of victims of trafficking. The office, finally, the office intends to disaggregate data to establish most prevalent forms of trafficking in persons, as we have noticed that there is a tradition of concentrating on certain types of trafficking in certain kinds of offenses of trafficking in persons. And just to end, I want to say in the year 2019-2020, my office registered 174 cases and received 73 convictions, which translates to 42%. As an office, we know this is not the best conviction rate that we should have, but bearing in mind the measures that we have mentioned, we will enhance prosecution and the outcome in court by sensitizing the public on what to do and training our prosecutors to bring the best and all the other parties. Let me end by extending a hand of appreciation to the organizers of this celebration to commemorate the International Day, the World Day Against Human Trafficking. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Director of Public Prosecution, for your participation in this, and we know the role chief guests they play on matters prosecution and investigation, together with DCI. Chief guest and our honorable guests who are participating physically, virtually, allow me now to invite the Deputy High Commissioner to Kenya, the UK Deputy High Commissioner to Kenya, Madam Susie Chicken. Madam Susie, welcome.
Madam Susie, Christine. Madam Susie. Go ahead.
The Government of Kenya, the Chair of the Counter-Trafficking in Persons Advisory Committee, Chair of the National Assistance Task Force for Victims of Trafficking, representatives from the IOM, the UNODC and the OTC, Ambassador MacArthur. Thank you for the opportunity to speak today to mark World Day Against Trafficking in Persons. Human trafficking is amongst the most horrible forms of international crime. It takes like transportation, making vulnerable men, women, children, some is country. Concentrating other forms of crime. We must go on.
Your sound is a bit sticky. Are you able to maybe move a little bit near the microphone, because you can't hear you properly?
You can't hear me?
That's better.
Tackling modern slavery as a top UK foreign policy priority. The call to modern slavery and human trafficking people from the UK during the US just by my country, including across Kenya. We're setting operating with a system where victims are regularly trafficked to the UK scale with multi-level organisations such as the Common Communities. Governments and data on SDG 8.7 and governments international aid to prioritise efforts to populating as victims. The UK and Kenya in renewed efforts of these horrific crimes. For several years, the UK has provided police and law agencies to Kenya specialised uniforms people affected fighting these trackers. Since 2015, we have provided operational and gaining support to Kenya's anti-human trafficking, health action and transnational organised crime units, leading to a number of successes where victims were safeguarded and trackers arrested. The UK has been working in collaborative office of public prosecutors and prosecutors in states with anti-trackers. That has been through the mutually listening to taking on tracking. Prosecution will take action of these.
Apologies, the sound is really bad. We can't hear you at all. I think your internet is a bit slow.
I guess we've lost Susie. Our chief guest, I guess we give her time. Maybe she comes on board after a while. Is that okay, Jennifer?
Yes.
Okay. Chief guest, our esteemed guests, allow me to humbly now welcome a very important speaker who supports this program just like the UK, as will be epitomed by the speech by our chief guest. The United States of America to Kenya Ambassador, His Excellency Kerry McCarter.
Balozi, you're next.
Good morning. To join you today for this event to commemorate the World Day Against Trafficking in Persons. Thank you to Cabinet Secretary Simon Shehu, the Ministry of Labor and Social Protection and Counter Trafficking in Persons Advisory Committee for organizing this event. I commend you for your continued commitment to combating this crime we confront in both Kenya and the United States. Today's events demonstrate how important this issue really is. Freedom and justice must prevail. Human trafficking remains a pressing, dire issue that the United States government is committed to eradicating. We are honored to support your efforts to Kenya is working together to put an end to this worldwide problem. I hope today's events will uncover new opportunities to improve our joint efforts to combat human trafficking. As Secretary Pompeo has said, human trafficking is one of the most horrific crimes on earth. Right now, traffickers are robbing a staggering 25 million people of their freedom worldwide. That's more than half the population of Kenya. While the magnitude of the crime may seem daunting, if we work together, we can and we will break the bonds of modern day slavery. the challenges cannot serve as an excuse for inaction. While the magnitude of this is something hard to believe, it should not keep us from, again, taking bold steps to end it. Human trafficking is a stain on humanity and violates basic human rights. We have to work together to share information, improve investigations and prosecutions, strengthen preventative measures, and help survivors recover and thrive. These discussions are more important today than ever before. The pandemic has had a disproportionate impact on the health and livelihoods of trafficking victims and survivors. The pandemic has disrupted economic activities, increased the risk of exploitation, and delayed access to justice and support systems. As we continue to make progress on anti-trafficking initiatives, I encourage you to consider how to protect those who are most at risk during the pandemic. But human trafficking is not an issue that governments can address alone. We also must not forget the importance of partnering closely with NGOs, local communities, other stakeholders to prevent trafficking, raise public awareness, and assist victims. Today I want to recognize the courageous work of trafficking survivors and activists. I recently had the pleasure of speaking to a very courageous young woman by the name of Sophie Otende. Sophie is an advisor for HEART. She has turned her story of pain into promise for so many. I thoroughly enjoyed my conversation with her. You could tell that her whole life ahead of her has been committed to making sure others do not experience what she had to. We congratulate her for being selected as one of the United States Department of State's 2020 TIP Heroes. She indeed is a hero. Her story, as well as the example of so many other Canadians, should spur us to take even bolder actions to address this heinous crime. As we mark World Day Against Trafficking in Persons, I want to thank again Kenya for demonstrating the courage and commitment to stop this crime. Together we can ensure freedom and dignity for all. Thank you.
Thank you, Your Excellency, the United States of America Ambassador to Kenya, and thank you, Sophie, for being a role model in this, as mentioned by His Excellency the Ambassador. Waziri and our esteemed guests, allow me to invite our chief guest in the ministry, our Chief Administrative Secretary in the Ministry of Labor and Social Protection, to make his remark. Honorable Ntutu, welcome.
Thank you very much, PS. Our Cabinet Secretary and the Ministry of Labor and Social Protection, the Principal Secretary, State Department for Social Protection, the United States Ambassador to Kenya, His Excellency Kael Makata, a Chairperson, Counter Trafficking Person Advisory Committee, Mr. George Masese, a Chairperson, National Assistance Trust Fund for Victims of Trafficking, Honorable Major Retired Marcus Mulevi, Chief of Mission, IAM, Kenya, Country Office, Mrs. Sharon Dimache, the Director of Public Prosecution, Representative, UK Deputy High Commissioner to Kenya, Mrs. Susie Kitchens, representatives of our social partners, development partners, representative from government ministries, department and agencies, the staff of the ministries, distinguished guests, ladies and gentlemen, good morning all. Sir, before you give your keynote address, allow me to make brief remarks. First, counter-trafficking of person is inhuman way of treating our fellow human beings. It is actually the new form of slavery, especially trafficking in person for cheap labor, and the whole world must unite and condemn anyone who still does not understand this fact. Here in Kenya, our ministry coordinates implementation of the Counter-Trafficking in Person Act 2010 and activities aimed at combating trafficking in persons. Specifically, our ministry coordinates the Counter-Trafficking in Persons Advisory Committee, whose functions include advising the Cabinet Secretary on interagency activities aimed at combating trafficking in person and how to implement preventive, protective, and rehabilitative programs for trafficked persons. This advisory committee comprises of representatives of state and non-state agencies dealing with all issues relating to trafficking in persons. Our ministry also coordinates the National Assistance Trust Fund for victims of trafficking in persons, and we also offer the Counter-Trafficking in Persons Secretariat, which is currently being provided by the Department of Children's Service. Realizing the gravity of person, the United Nations General Assembly Day against trafficking in persons. This day is marked to raise awareness of the situation of victims of human trafficking and for the promotion and protection of their rights. As a country, this is the 4th year that we are joining the rest of the world in commemorating the day. Our ministry, through the Counter-Trafficking in Persons Secretariat, has been coordinating the marking of this day through various activities, including public rallies and media engagement. For example, in 2017, exhibitions were held in Nairobi, and in 2018, a public rally was held in Mombasa, and last year, in 2019, a public rally was held in Busia. This year is, however, different because of the outbreak of COVID-19, and therefore we are having to commemorate this day virtually. Every year, as a country, we develop objectives to guide the commemoration. For this year, our objectives include sensitizing the public on dangers of trafficking in person, creating awareness on the increased risk and new forms of recruitment arising from COVID-19 pandemic, that is online recruitment, informing the public on reporting and the overall mechanism for cases of human trafficking, and strengthening collaboration between the state and non-state actors in combating trafficking in person. Our ministry has done well in coordinating the counter-trafficking in person activities in the country, and we appreciate our staff who are doing this noble work. Going forward, our chief guest, we are aiming at increased collaboration with all the other agencies involved in this exercise. With these brief remarks, allow me now to invite our chief guest, Cabinet Secretary in charge of Labor and Social Protection, Mr. Simon Chelgui,
to give his keynote address. Thank you. Welcome, Waziri.
Thank you. Thank you very much. Our Chief Administrative Secretary, thank you for those remarks and compliments. Your Excellency, the Ambassador of the United States of America to Kenya, Kyle MacArthur. Your Excellency, the British Deputy High Commissioner to Kenya, Mrs. Susie Kitchens. Regional representatives of the United Nations Office on Drugs and Crime, Mr. Amado Philip D. Andres. Chief of Mission, IOM Kenya Country Office, Ms. Sharon Dimache. Director of Public Prosecutions, Mr. Nurdin Aji. Chairperson of Counter Trafficking in Persons Advisory Committee, Mr. George Masese. Chairperson of the National Trust Fund for Victims of Trafficking, Honorable Major Retired Marcus Maluvi. Representatives of our social partners and development partners joining us virtually, representatives from government ministries, departments and agencies, ministry staff, members of the fourth estate, distinguished guests, ladies and gentlemen, good morning.
Good morning.
I first, before I make my remarks, acknowledge the remarks made by the various speakers, beginning from the immediate speaker, His Excellency, the American Ambassador and the UK Deputy High Commissioner, and even the stakeholders on the need to control and manage this menace of trafficking, human trafficking. And as stated, I want to thank the American Ambassador who has worked with us, partnered with us in management of this challenge that we are facing. And as he said, Kenya is not alone, and we look forward to working as a team with our international partners, international community, other governments in addressing this problem. Trafficking is not a local challenge, it is an international challenge. And I believe working together with our agencies, the DPP, the DCI, and all the partners involved, IOM, National Employment Authority, we will be able to bring this problem to control. And I'm happy and I'm excited by the numbers given by the speakers, that we are reducing, but we are not yet there. So I believe all efforts must be put in place to make sure that we control and manage this challenge. I am delighted to join you during this occasion to mark the World Day Against Trafficking in Persons. Kenya is a signatory to Palermo Protocol, which addresses prevention, suppression, and punishing of trafficking in persons, especially women and children, which we acceded as a country on the 5th of January 2005, and later domesticated through our Counter Trafficking in Persons Act 2010. We must therefore treat trafficking in persons as a serious crime, which often goes unreported, and violation of human rights. Trafficking in persons is defined as a recruitment, transportation, and transfer happening or received of persons by means of threat or use of force or other forms of coercion, abduction, fraud, deception, abuse of power or position of vulnerability, or the giving or receiving of payments or benefits to achieve the consent of a person having control over another person for the purpose of exploitation, which at the minimum includes exploitation of the prostitution of others or other forms of sexual exploitation, forced labor or services, slavery, or practices similar to slavery, servitude, and removal of organs. Globally, people are trafficked for sexual exploitation, forced labor, forced begging, forced marriage, jail cell and child soldiers, removal of organs, and other forms of exploitation and abuse. Unfortunately, women at 49% and girls at 23% rank the highest among all victims of trafficking. In Kenya, the most prevalent forms of trafficking are labor and sexual exploitation. It is important to note that the crime of trafficking in person is not only cross-border phenomenon, but also an internal phenomenon. Here in Kenya, the most prevalent internal trafficking in person involved children trafficking from rural areas to urban areas for exploitation as domestic workers. From July 2019 to date, 612 cases of child labor have been reported to the Child Protection Information Management System. This year, the world marked this day under extraordinary circumstances following the outbreak of COVID-19 pandemic. To curb the spread of COVID-19, our government introduced a raft of measures which have significantly reduced the spread but have also led to unintended consequence of job losses. Due to these job losses, there is an increase in the number of people falling below the poverty line and hence increasing the vulnerability of trafficking. Similarly, some of the measures introduced to contain the spread of COVID-19 are exposing victims of trafficking to further exploitation, especially because of these measures have led to limited access to services as most victims' assistance programs have scaled down operations. For example, identification of victims, which is difficult under normal circumstances, has become even harder in the face of the COVID-19 pandemic. There has also been reported increase in child sexual exploitation, which is one form of trafficking, and further, the increase in online activities, especially among the young people, has increased in their vulnerability to online recruitment. In addition, due to a cessation of air travel, we have noticed that some victims who had been identified for repatriation back to their countries cannot travel. Similarly, despite the efforts being made by the Street Families Rehabilitation Trust Fund, which is under my ministry, to reduce the number of street families, we are noticing the worrying return of people begging on the streets, especially children, which increases their vulnerability to both internal and cross-border trafficking. And I want to inform that the government is working on measures to return to air transport, and I believe we will be able to expedite on repatriation of any identified victims or traffickers to their country, to their source countries. So even though we are still working on containing this pandemic, we are also making efforts to ensure that we open our airspace to enable us to move back and repatriate those who may have been identified. The theme of this year's celebration, committed to cause, working on the front line to end human trafficking, focusing on the first respondents to human trafficking, the persons working in different sectors to identify, support, and counsel and seek justice for victims of trafficking and challenging the impunity of traffickers. And I want to thank the Director of Criminal Investigation, the Director of Public Prosecution, and all our agencies involved and partnering with us in working. These people must be pursued, they must be found, and they must be dealt with. We must give justice to those who are involved. The COVID-19 crisis has made the work of the frontline workers harder since it has become difficult to identify, screen, and rescue the victims, while at the same time protecting themselves from the virus. Let me therefore take this opportunity to thank all the frontline workers who have continued working under these harsh realities to protect the victims and prosecute perpetrators of human trafficking in the face of COVID-19 pandemic. You are our heroes today. Ladies and gentlemen, while trafficking in persons affects all countries, some countries are more vulnerable than others. Even though Kenya has been identified as a source, transit, and destination, country for cross-border trafficking, we have made major strides in the fight against trafficking in persons, guided by globally agreed upon action plan parameters of the 4 P's of prevention, protection, prosecution, and partnership. The 4 P's of prevention, protection, prosecution, and partnership. Some of the government achievements towards countering trafficking in persons include implementation of Counter Trafficking in Persons Act 2010 through establishment of multi-agency Counter Trafficking in Persons Advisory Committee that coordinate counter trafficking in persons activities, operationalization of the National Assistance Trust Fund for victims of trafficking, development of national referral mechanism for assisting victims of human trafficking in Kenya, which provides guidelines for standardized system of identification, assessment, referral, holistic support, assistance, and reintegration of victims of trafficking in Kenya. So far, these guidelines have been disseminated in 16 counties. Other achievements include capacity building of law enforcement officers, which has been mentioned by the officer from Office of the Director of Public Prosecution, which has been done in conjunction with UNODC, IOM, GIZ, and NGOs, leading to more than 600 law enforcement officers being trained on issues related to counter-trafficking in persons. Similarly, in collaboration with the non-governmental organizations, we have undertaken sensitization communities, especially those in border counties, on prevention measures in trafficking in persons. In addition, 2018 to date, my ministry has rescued over 1,500 victims of trafficking of various nationalities, besides managing to get 61 convictions, with numerous other cases going on in various courts in the country. And on this, as said by the Office of the DPP, over 42% success rate, achievement of prosecution. And I want to acknowledge and thank the Office of the DPP. Because of these concerted efforts, we will truly bring this menace to control. To reduce vulnerability, the government has put in place various programs, including Inua Jamii Cash Transfer Program that targets older persons, orphans, and vulnerable children and persons with severe disability, some of whom are in category of most vulnerable to trafficking. Under for coordinating that event, where we brought 11 counties in the honor